So welcome back to another Maya 2017 tutorial. First of all, thanks very much to everyone who's been commenting on the channel. It really means a lot to me that you guys are taking time to watch these things and actually kind of like give me notes and things about what you think is going on. And today, this is the second part of the low poly modeling tutorial where we're going to keep working on this lighthouse that we've been building over the last week. And it's a great time for us to keep looking through the modeling tools which are inside of the basic tools of Maya. If you want to skip ahead through the video, there are some main chapter points in the show notes below. And please be sure to give us a like or a subscription if you actually like what you're seeing and you want to be more informed about when the videos are coming out, though I'm still going to be trying to post them early on every week. So coming back to our lighthouse model, and I'm still working in my quad view over here. I might be jumping in and out of this main view over here. We're going to start making some of the refined detail that is inside here, mostly designing the lights for the lighthouse over here, designing this little rail which is over here, these little decorations at the top that support this platform, and also making the windows and the front door over here as well. And we're going to be doing all of that while going through a few of the tools which are inside the basic modeling toolkit, which is inside here, which has a lot of the great kind of like tools that you can use in Maya at just the click of a button. But I will be diving into the mesh tools up here inside of the modeling menu at the top of Maya as well a few times, and I'll go pointing out which ones I'm going to be using. I'll also be pointing out some of the differences of what these things do as well and where they're useful as and where we need them. Okay, so hopefully I might be able to hit most of these by the time we finish this video. So first of all, let's start thinking about creating the windows for the lighthouse over here. And what I'm going to do is, first of all, start making the right selection. So I'm going to go into my edge mode over here, or using the buttons in the modeling toolkit over here. And what I want to do is subdivide this middle section over here. Basically add a little bit more detail to where I'm going to cut out all of these windows that you can see in the reference over here. So I'm going to click on one of the edges and shift and click on the edge parallel to it to create a ring selection like that, and I'm going to start cutting up these edges to make a new set of subdivisions. Now if I want to control how to do that specifically, well, there's quite a few tools that allow you to subdivide the mesh, which would be the add divisions tool. I could use the smooth tool, but I'm specifically interested in using the connect tool because I want to make a specific type of cut. I'm going to hit the connect tool over here, and you're going to see that this creates a little loop all the way around on my selection. There'll also be some menu items over here on the side which will allow me to choose how many segments I want to cut over here. So if I change this to 2, you're further going to see that here we have these perpendicular loops based on the ring selection that I made over here. And that's how the connect tool works. It almost draws a line perpendicular to the edges that we have, so we can very precisely cut things in here. Now there's another two options that I'm not going to be using, but they are the slide tool over here, and these tools you can actually click with the middle mouse button in the viewport, and that will allow you to slide your edge loops up and down as you go creating them. You can pinch them as well so they can be closer together or further apart, but I actually want to split these up in regular segments, so every segment is going to be exactly the same as the other. So I'm going to put the slide down to 0.5, which is its original value, and I'm going to change this one to 0 over here. So there's no pinch, there's no slide, and we've just got 2 segments by itself. I'm going to type enter to confirm that connection, and that's now going to add a few more polygon faces inside of here like that. Really useful. Now I'm going to switch into face mode, which I can also do with the buttons up here as well. Please look back at the previous video if you need a refresh on that. And I'm going to double click on the adjacent face to make a loop selection like this. And the next thing that I'm going to do is that I could spend some time going around and shift and double clicking and making multiple selections like this, but I want to show you a new tool of how to do that as well. Now, I'm just going to put this back to the point where I selected this inner ring like this. And what I'm going to do is either go into the select options over here and look for a tool that's called grow, or I'm going to use this less than and greater than keys to either grow or shrink my selection. So if I click grow, you're going to see that just with that one click, it selects all of the edges around this. To give you guys an example, I have to hold down Shift on my keyboard to use the greater than and less than keys, but if I use the greater than key, it's going to make a larger selection. It's almost like stepping up through my mesh, selecting more and more polygon faces. And as I go using the less than key, it's going to use less, more, or less selection, just like that. Really easy to actually use once you remember that you can use the greater than and less than keys to grow your selections and make them smaller as well. Now, with all of these faces selected, which we can do in multiple ways as well, I'm not saying this is the only way, but I want to introduce as many tools as I possibly can to you guys. What I'm going to do now is that I'm going to use the extrude tool to cut in an individual window into every single one of these polygon faces. And the way that I'm going to do that is that I'm going to click on the extrude tool and I'm going to play around with some of the options inside this floating window over here. What I'm going to do is take this option that says keep faces together, and I can either left click and drag until it becomes off, or I can type 0 inside here, or just click inside the little floating window as well, and that will just allow me to basically turn this property on and off because it's only got 2 options. You can't type in there anymore. Now what we're going to do is change the scale of this object with this keep faces together turned off. And if I scale from the middle of my transform gizmo, you're going to see that it's going to start creating these little windows inside of my lighthouse just like that. Okay? If I want them thicker or thinner, I can actually grab the x-axes and the y-axes just to give them a little bit more shape if I think that's necessary, because my subdivisions might be slightly different to yours. But you can just scale those individual faces, and the only change that we've made is using this keep faces together on and off. Really, really, really useful. And then to keep making the rest of my windows, I'm going to basically create a little window frame by using the extrude tool one more time. I can also hit G on my keyboard to repeat my last command. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to push these windows in a little bit with the z-axis. Notice that we can also use the local translate z slider on here as well, and these sliders will allow us to do similar things to as if we were using the manipulators, or just give us a little bit of fine control if we so need it. Okay, and now what we've done is that very quickly we've created some window frames and the possibility of making some windows just like that. I'm going to hit the select tool to complete my extrude tool so I don't change anything by mistake. And then I'm just going to maximize this because I want to show you another tool in here as well. And the next step that I'm going to do is optional because it doesn't really reflect something that you have to do inside of the model. I just want to demonstrate to you guys the same way that we attached the sphere in here to help us with our modeling. Sometimes it's a good idea that people will ask you to extract polygon faces from your object and save them as a separate object for whatever reasons might be necessary. Maybe we have to break down this lighthouse later on to build the interior or something along those lines. So I just want to show you the extract tool, which will allow me to kind of like talk about a little bit about the separate tool as well, even though I'm not going to use it for this. But what I'm going to do is take all of the faces of the lighthouse and extract them out as a separate object, which later on I can texture as glass or any other material that you might fancy. Let's say, for example, if I still have all of my polygon windows selected, I'm going to go into the Edit Mesh tool, and with the default options, I'm just going to click on the tool called Extract. And it might not look like it's done much right now, but that's actually torn out all of those windows, and you see that now my object is highlighted in white. I'm going to click again on the Select tool, and I'm going to click on my lighthouse, go back to object mode, and I'm going to use a keyboard shortcut called Control-H to hide my object. We used this also in the previous tutorial to hide some things away. And you're going to see that I've got all of these windows. Now don't worry, we have not erased the lighthouse, we've just hidden it away from our viewport. We'll call it back in a sec. But you'll see that all of these windows are now individual objects. If I come over here into my channel box, you'll see that this is polysurface 11, polysurface 34, polysurface 22, because they're not connected up to one another. There's a little gap in between. I've now ended up with a lot of polygon objects in my scene. So I'm going to select all of them, come back into the modeling toolkit and hit the combine tool, and this is going to create a shell, effectively a group of 3D objects. Now, I could always use the separate tool to select individual faces, and the separate tool would allow me to separate individual polygon shells. And polygon shells would be objects that are separated. They're not connected perfectly with with faces that are connected to one another. So all of these objects selected together, I'm going to call this windows, like that. And probably I should add a 0, 1 at the end of that name as well to just kind of like keep it consistent with my names. Now, how do I bring back an object that I've hidden inside of my scene? Well, there's a very handy tool inside of Maya, which is called the outliner, which if I go into Windows, Outliner, the outliner is like a list that has all of the polygon objects which are inside of my scene. If we look over here, we can see that we've got various objects like the cameras, which we've got in our scene, which is our different viewports. We've got the image planes, which we created for our reference. And now somewhere in here, I've got a Windows object over here. And notice that I can click on the Windows object in the outliner to select it, which is a very handy way of selecting objects which are either hidden away or hard to get to. Now, my lighthouse proxy is hidden away and it's got this little gray color to it, but I'm actually looking for my low poly lighthouse. And this is inside a little group over here, and you'll see that it's got this little object over here called poly surface. Now it's called poly surface because we extracted some things to it, so if I wanted to, I could call this low poly lighthouse again, 0, 1. There we go. And what I'm going to do is just click on this object over here, and instead of using Control H to hide, I'm going to press Shift H to reveal, and that's going to call back my object into the viewport. Okay, now I could play around with these over here, but I'm not going to touch the groups and the ordering and stuff like that. I could clean up my outliner later on if I wanted to, but for now I'm going to leave it like that just so I can keep it simple for you guys. And after I finish selecting things with the outliner, I can just hide it away and I can call it back whenever I want to. So now what I can do is very quickly just create myself a small little shader using the hypershade. I'm not going to do anything fancy, so I'm just going to come into a Lambert shader over here because I'm not doing any rendering at all today. And I'm just going to make this Lambert shader to have a little bit of transparency, so I'm going to drag that to like 50% there. If I wanted to, I can change its color to kind of like a light blue. You know, no real fancy stuff here at all. But this Lambert shader, I'm just going to call it glass. And even though it isn't a shader that I'm going to use for my final render, it's sometimes good just to give people an indication of what this object is. I'm going to middle mouse button drag this onto my little window object over here inside of my viewport, and now you're going to see that that shader is applied to all of the windows around the lighthouse. And again, that's going to let me see through it because I've just played around with that transparency option like that. And as I said before, it's just an indication that that is going to be a glass material that somebody else or myself will texture later on. Okay? So that completes the part of my lighthouse windows over here. And what we're going to do now is we're going to start working on the banister over here and adding in just a few more tools as well. But now that we've hit this milestone, it's a good time to do a nice increment and save a new version of our actual Maya scene. So now I'm going to show you another modeling technique which is by no means standard. Depending on how you work, and if you're working with other people, you might have to follow specific modeling constraints, but if you're modeling your own 3D objects, techniques like this are perfectly fine. What I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be reusing some of the polygon faces to help me build different sections of the lighthouse. And as I'm working in low poly, I'm not going to worry too much about cleaning up my topology later on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into face mode. I'll make sure that I've got the polygon modeling tools over here just in case I need them. And what I'm going to do is that I'm going to select the top face, one of the top faces of this platform, double click next to it and make a loop selection of all of these polygon faces. I'm now going to duplicate those faces to help me build the banister. And I could make things out of standard primitives, but if this is fairly close by to where I'm building and it's roughly the right shape, I can reuse assets again and again and just kit bash them together in different ways. So what I'm going to do is go into the Edit Mesh tools, and down at the bottom I'm going to use Duplicate. Don't confuse it with Edit Duplicate, which would create another object. I'm still in the sub-object tools inside of Maya. So I'm going to choose Polygon Faces Duplicate, and that's going to create a set of polygon faces like this, which I am going to drag up like this, just so that you guys can see it. Then I'm going to go into Edge Mode, double click to create a loop, and I'm going to scale this loop from the middle, and this is now going to be the width of my banister. I might just double click on the outside of this as well, and that will allow me to just scale it maybe just in a little bit like that, so it doesn't touch the edge like that. And this little flat plane is now going to be the starting point for my banister. Now, the same way that we can duplicate edges, faces, and everything else, it's very similar to taking the extrude tool, but you'll see that this is not connected to one another in any way. So I've just duplicated these faces, moved them up, and now what I'm going to do is just use the extrude tool here to allow me to move down a little bit of extra geometry, and that's what's going to make this side of my banister over here just like that. Pretty cool. Now, one of the things that you might be thinking of right now is that, okay, I've got two edges selected like this. I might be able to use the fill gap tool to actually create basically a filling point over here. And if I go into mesh and I choose fill hole, sorry, not fill gap, but fill hole, if I click on this, it's going to add a polygon face that goes all the way across this over here, and that's not exactly what I want. This is going to be similar to using the bridge tool, except that sometimes the bridge tool doesn't exactly find its path correctly. And what's going to happen is that you might be able to solve it with this twist option over here. You might get those edges to align up perfectly, but sometimes even Maya with its best attempts might not be able to solve this. Sometimes it works in a click, sometimes it doesn't, but if it doesn't work, like is my case right now, what you can do is select two edges, hit the bridge tool, and you might have to reconstruct all of this one step at a time by selecting two edges and pushing the bridge button or pressing the G key on your keyboard to repeat your last command. Another thing you can do is that you can double click here and you could kind of like deselect these edges over here and hit bridge after you've made like one connection. And luckily enough for me, it does look like that has worked. Sometimes you just need to fill in one edge on either side and make sure that then you do a loop selection and just make sure that you deselect whatever edges are just kind of like here perpendicular to your selection. And hopefully Maya should be able to figure out then, oh, this is how you wanted to connect this. So again, if you need to go one step at a time, that's fine. If you need to do lots of little steps, that's fine as well. And sometimes you might just be lucky and you push a button and it works perfectly fine. And this whole explanation has been more than what you've needed to know. So now I've got the starting point of my banister, but it's floating up in the air. And what do I need to do now? Well, I'd like to make a series of struts that would come out from this banister over here. I'm going to use another tool inside of Maya to do that, that is traditionally used for making edges like this. I'm just going to show you a quick example before I Control Z. But let's say, for example, if I took this banister over here and I use the Bevel tool over here, and I click on the bevel, and the bevel is kind of like adding a little 45-degree angle, a little segment on the edge that you've selected. Effectively, what it does is that it takes that edge loop that I just selected around my banister, and when I hit bevel, it splits it into two pieces by default, but you can add as many segments as you would like in here as well. So I can have many, many, many different parts of the bevel, and it will actually round off those edges as well, the more segments I have. So using that knowledge, that what does a bevel do? It splits edges. What I'm going to do is double click on these edges over here, do a loop selection, and go and hold down my shift key and make multiple loop selections across my banister like this. So I'm just going to wait for a second. Hopefully Maya won't get too confused. So if it makes a mistake, I'm just going to press Ctrl Z for a second. Double click, double click, double click. We'll get there. Double click. And just a few more. Double click, double click, double click, double click in your own time. And you should have selected all of the loops that go around the banister like that. So I'm holding down Shift, double clicking, and making multiple selections. So what I'm going to do now is that with these loops, I am going to go ahead and press the bevel tool like this. Now this looks very extreme and it's rounded everything off very nicely like this. But what I'm going to do is just add, say, 0.1 of a bevel like that. And what that's going to do is split all of those edges. So now I can press Enter on my keyboard, change to polygon face mode, and looking up at this object like this, if I want to, I can just click on these polygon faces over here, over here, over here, over here, over here, over here. I'm just selecting the bottom part of those split beveled edges that I just selected. So again, making multiple selections, pressing the Shift key, and using Alt and the mouse buttons to rotate, zoom in and zoom out. So I'm selecting all of those edges. I'm going to do an extrude, and I'm going to do that extrusion down, 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 like that. If I wanted to, I could also scale those a little bit, just to give them a little bit of a change in shape, like that. And I've created all of those struts very, 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 very quickly. If I want to be very fine and precise as well, I can choose how high these go in wireframe mode, but that's not really a problem. As long as they're hidden away inside of the geometry, I won't mind. Others might. So I'm going to come over here and go back into object mode like that, and you're going to see that we've got this little object over here which we duplicated, and we're going to call this object, let's call it banister over here. Okay. If I wanted to, I could connect it to my lighthouse as well, but that's an option that I'll let you guys choose, because you can select these two objects and combine them together if you wanted to as well, so everything's connected to one another. So that takes care of the next section inside of my lighthouse, so I'm going to do another quick file increment and save as well, to save another version whenever we make a major milestone. So now that we've got the banister made, let's start working our way down and thinking about these kind of decorations, which are the struts that support this platform over here. And for that, I'm going to make another polygon object using my interactive create tool. So what I'm going to do is that in the side view, I'm going to zoom in over here, because I originally made these support struts out of a new box. I'm going to introduce another tool which is very handy inside of Maya, but is not inside of the modeling toolkit, but it's been in Maya for a long time and I think it's absolutely great. I'm going to come over here, I'm going to select to make a polygon box as well, so I might need some of my multiple views open. I'm going to come over and go to create polygon primitives, make sure that I've got interactive creation turned on, and go into cube. And then I'm going to click and drag in my side view over here, kind of like inside the platform, and I'm going to make a singular box over here until it kind of like cuts into the actual side of my lighthouse like that. You can see it over here in my side view. And then what I can do is click and drag and hopefully give it a width. There we go. And you can see it growing in my perspective view like that. I think something like that will look just fine. Okay, so I've just made a box thanks to the interactive creation mode, specifically where I wanted to build it in the geometry. And that's thanks to using my quad view and my reference. So the next thing I want to do is that I want to polygon model this box into this support strut over here. So I'm going to make a curve that goes across it like this. And how can I do that? Well, what I'm going to do is add some subdivisions. But these subdivisions, they're not going to be regularly cut into the side of the object. The connect tool would work, but I would have to maybe make a few changes later on after I'd subdivided it a few times. But I'm going to introduce you guys to another tool which is inside of Maya, which is inside the Mesh Tools, which is a tool that's called the Insert Edge Loop tool, which has been in Maya for a really long time. What does the Insert Edge Loop do? Well, when I click on it over here, I can select any polygon object over here, and you're going to see that as I click and drag, it's going to cut a perpendicular edge loop like that. And I'm going to drag this up here so that it matches that edge loop line inside of my reference, just like that. And then I'm going to press again on these vertical edges, click on it, click and drag, and I'm going to create another edge like this. I'm then going to create another edge over here, and then this edge at the bottom is going to be just a little tiny one like that over there. Now, it doesn't have to be, you can place these edges wherever you want, but you're going to learn that to make curves, it's always nice to have kind of like a slightly uneven distribution of your edges to an extent. They don't all have to be perfectly the same size as well, even though I've sculpted them fairly similarly here. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is go into vertex mode, and I'm just going to start moving some of these edges. So I'm going to click and drag on my side view over here, make sure that I am in vertex mode over here, which should allow me to select these. I'm going to make sure that I change to my move tool because I'm still using the insert edge loop tool, and that's why that's not going to work. So I'm going to come over here, select these edges, and I'm going to start pushing them inwards like that, following my reference like that. I'm going to come over here, click and drag and select on these few vertices on the edge over here, select the next ones, and there you go. And you're going to see that this larger one over here, I'm just going to move it up a little bit, like so. It's going to give me one part of the curve, this is going to be another part of the curve, and this is going to be another part of the curve over here as well. It doesn't have to be perfect. But what's really nice is that in just a few clicks, we've started creating the actual support strut over here. Now I can see that I've missed kind of like connecting this to the bottom over here. So what I'm going to do is click and drag this down, 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 down until it intersects the actual base over here. Now it's better for it to be over than for it to be under, because if you leave little gaps like this, as soon as you turn your lights on inside of Maya, you're going to get all these nasty shadows that will reveal that it's not a well-made 3D object. So I'm going to go into object mode over here, select this, and now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to duplicate this object multiple times all the way around my scene. Now you could be thinking about, we could be using duplicate, and we could be moving and rotating these all into place, but I'm going to show you a faster way of doing this as well. You can do it by hand, but I think that if you learn these few little tricks, your life in Maya will become much, much, much easier. So I'm going to select this little strut over here. I haven't renamed it yet, but what I'm going to do is change the location of its pivot point. So what I'm going to do is press Insert on my keyboard, and I'm going to reposition this pivot point. And I'm going to do that either to the home grid, if this is perfectly aligned here, or I'm just going to use my vertex tool over here. So as I move this around my viewport, it's always going to move the pivot point to a vertex. Now here's an interesting thing that happens, because I want to align it to the middle of my tower over here. And in my top view, I'm really having trouble getting it into the middle of my scene. The reason why that is happening is if I come over here, I'm just going to do a quick selection of my viewport cameras by going into Show in my perspective view and choosing Camera. And you see that plane there? That is where my camera actually is. So the reason why I can't see this point at the top of my tower is because my camera is currently too low. It's almost like inside the tower itself. So all I need to do is actually raise it up. I'm going to press Insert on my keyboard again just before I do this, just in case I mess around with the pivot point of my camera by accident. And what I'm going to do is select the camera itself by clicking on the viewport menu over here. So I want to select my top camera over here, and I could move this by hand, or I could just type a new value in the channel box over here. So again, I'm using the viewport button over here of select camera, which is handily this little camera icon. I'm then going to go into translate Y, and I'm going to type a value of, let's say, 2000, like that. And that's going to move my camera up in space like that, and then I'm going to hide the cameras again like this. Now if I go back to my little tower over here, and again I'm going to use the change pivot point as well, I should be able to just move the pivot point anywhere inside of my scene as well. I think I actually got it to the base in the middle over there, but just to double check, again you can move this wherever you like. So again I'm going to press insert on my keyboard. I am going to use my arrow tools over here. I'm just going to make sure that my tower is actually aligned to this point up here, because I know that that is absolutely in the center over here as well. Maybe it will align to the bottom as well, like that by accident. But again, just one of those things that if you ever wonder why you can't see objects in your orthographic view, it might just be about the position of your camera as well. So again, I'm going to turn this off over here. And now this, hopefully, oops. Now I know why that is wrong. It's because I'm grabbing the wrong object. I grabbed the pivot point of my lighthouse, which I didn't have to change, and I just moved this over here. It'll be fine for now. So again, with the strut selected, not the lighthouse, I'm going to come over here and I'm going to move that pivot point to the top of the tower over there. Very handily, because I can choose pivot points that are from other objects, just like this, okay? And later on, I'll reset the pivot point of my tower. Or why not, let's just do it now. So I'll just select the tower over here, and instead of using the vertex snap, I'm going to use the grid snap over here just to make it a little bit easier. I'm just going to move this, oops, there we go, press insert. I'm just going to move this down to the grid like so, and hopefully it should snap at one point to the base of my tower, round about there. If I come up closer, am I on the right port? There we go, perfectly aligned. Turn off grid snap, turn off insert, and there we go. A little bit of extra trouble for trying to do things a quicker way. There we go. So what I'm going to do is, with this section selected over here, the pivot point is now in the middle of the tower. I'm going to take the rotate tool just to demonstrate something. If I rotate this pivot round and round and round like this, you're going to see that if I move in the y-axis, it looks like the strut is pivoting around the tower. And that's very handy for me, because what's going to happen is that if I come into here and I select this object over here, I can duplicate it using a special command inside of Maya, which is going to allow me to use a rotation to set my copy. Now what I'm going to do is come into Edit and choose Duplicate Special, but I'm going to go into the Options box over here to select my Duplicate Special, and actually some of my settings have already been copied into here because I was practicing with these before. You're probably going to have 0 in here and making a singular copy over here. Now Duplicate Special allows you to make multiple copies of the same object, which is really handy for me, because one of the things that I want to do is I want to make 11 copies of this object over here. Okay, and if I hit apply, it would just make 11 copies in the same spot where this is located. Very similar to if you press Control D or Apple D on your keyboard. But one of the neat things about this is that I can choose to rotate an object around using a rotation, a scale, or a translate value. And these are mapped to X, Y, and Z. So I can rotate in the X-axis around the red axis over here, around the y-axis, or around the z-axis. So I'm going to rotate it 30 degrees in the y-axis. And if I now press Duplicate Special, what's going to happen is that it's going to make 11 copies. I don't need 12, because that was the one that I had originally built, and it's going to spin all of these around the new pivot point that I chose. If we'd done this with just a box, it would have rotated around the middle of the box per se. So changing your pivot point is a great way to model things and create things very, very, very quickly. Even though I'm explaining this to you, that is just the click of a button to make 11 objects and place them in the right place, as long as I put my pivot point in somewhere that made sense. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select all of these little struts over here. I'm going to come back into the modeling toolkit and I'm going to go into combine and I'm going to turn them into a single object. You'll notice that now the pivot point jumps to the middle of these objects over here, and inside here I am going to call these struts O1. There we go. And now I've got another little detail for my lighthouse, which is these support struts that we made out of a simple box and that we duplicated really quickly thanks to the duplicate special tool. It's another good time to do a little save over here and just hit, oops, nope, don't archive my scene, thank you very much. Do increment and save, or hit Command, Apple and Shift, or Alt, Control and S on your keyboard. I have to keep remembering these keyboard shortcuts because they keep getting a bit more complicated. Alt, Apple, and S. Muscle memory is much easier than trying to say all of these things. But there we go. You'll see that very quickly we'll start making more of these details very quickly, and we're going to now start working our way further down the tower and make these windows and this door over here, again starting from a very simple basic object. Before we go any further, we might want to start making some small initial refinements to the actual look of the tower. We're not going to be modeling anything anymore, but you'll notice that this shaft over here and this sphere at the top is actually looking like very faceted. You can see that it's a 3D object because it's got all these hard little edges over here, while other parts of your tower might be perfectly smooth. It's important that when we're making things in 3D that we realize that these edges, how they display in low poly, are controlled by a property that is called the surface normals. But what we have to decide is that are these normals going to be displaying as a hard edge for every polygon face, or are they kind of like going to be connected together to one another? Now, whenever we're smoothing things out in 3D, we can do this in various ways. Sometimes, if I come over here and I select, let's say, a loop of these polygon faces of the shaft, I could come into here and there's a nice little button here that says smooth. But if I push smooth, what's going to happen is that it's going to introduce more subdivisions, more little edges inside of my scene, trying to make this tower look perfectly smooth. Now, if I come over here, the faceted edges, those normals, which were misbehaving, have disappeared completely. But now instead of having a polygon tower that's got 6 sides, I've introduced all of these little extra subdivisions, which is not really what I should be aiming to do at this stage, especially if I want to keep my geometry very, 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 very simple. You might think that we need to add some additional detail in some way, but mostly we're just going to control how the object is displayed by making a few selections. I'm going to, instead of using polygon faces, I'm going to start off by pressing the edge over here. I'm going to make an edge selection over here. So currently all of these edges are displaying as what Maya likes to call hard edges. And if I come up here into the menus and look for the edit mesh tools, no, the mesh display tools over here, you're going to see that there's these two tools here, one which is called harden edge and the other one which is called soften edge over here. And if I choose to select the edges that I find very faceted and choose soften edge over here, you're going to see that there's been no subdivisions occurring in the shaft over here. But when I go back to object mode and I just click off it, all of those faceted edges have now disappeared because Maya is kind of like cheating to us, and it's telling us kind of like, okay, all of these faces are kind of like connected to one another, so they should display as a smooth edge like that. You can use this type of thinking anywhere, and you'll see that, for example, in areas like the top of the tower over here, if I go into face mode, and let's say, for example, if I made a selection like this, and I'm going to use the grow tool like this to just grow my selection like that. What I can do now, I'm just going to maybe deselect this at the top over here. I can also make these types of selections by using the mesh display and go into the soften edges like that. Now all of these polygon faces that are selected should also appear soft. So if I go back to object mode, again, the faceted edges have disappeared. And you can just about see a little bit of smoothness, kind of like a little bit of jaggedness only around the edges. But as we look at it face on, you can't really see it. You can apply this logic to everywhere. But be careful, because sometimes if, say for example, I selected all of this, and again I'm going to hit G on my keyboard to soften all of my edges again, because that allows me to repeat my last command, you're going to see that maybe sometimes I want to have a hard edge somewhere here, maybe to separate like this little spire from the sphere over here. And currently they look like they're connected to one another. But what I can do is I can come into edges, select a loop that goes around here, and I can do the opposite of this operation. I can come into here, into my mesh displays, and choose harden edge instead. So now, again, sometimes I have to deselect this just to make sure that you guys can see without my wireframe on. There we go. I've just introduced a hard edge like that, which separates kind of like these two objects one from another. It's a really cool way of not incrementing the number of subdivisions of your object, but really kind of like having this kind of like nice smooth display like that. So feel free to go through your models and apply smooth and hard edges wherever you think they are necessary. There is another tool which is inside here, which won't have an effect for what we're trying to do today, but I'll just demonstrate it because it's slightly related as well. Let's say, for example, if I selected the top of my little dome over here. And this little dome over here, if I wanted to smooth it like before, you know, I could do a little bit of extra subdivisions. I could use the surface normals as well and use hard and soft edges, but sometimes we need to add more detail into an area inside of a model because we're going to manipulate it in a specific way, and that's where add divisions comes in as well. If I hit add divisions like this, you're going to see that it's going to subdivide all of these polygon faces into quads, and you can really kind of like go to town and add tons of subdivisions over here as well. But what I want you guys to notice is that the edges over here, they still remain faceted. We are adding more subdivisions, but we are not smoothing anything. And again, this is just an example, because if I have this selection and I use the smooth tool, it's also going to subdivide things, but notice that it's introducing a curve as well. So as I add more subdivisions, this area becomes curved, while add divisions changes my geometry to make it more faceted. And the only reason why we use this tool over here is if we need to refine things. Instead of going in with the cut tool or the insert edge loop tool, we can add lots of subdivisions, and then we can use some of Maya's sculpting tools to actually change the geometry if it's too low resolution. Okay? So just to explain what that does, there's just a small difference between smooth, that adds geometry with a curve, and add divisions that just adds extra geometry without affecting the shape that we've sculpted in our low poly. So let's think about now the windows and this door section over here. How can we go about creating those? Well, I'm going to go back into my quad view, and just like before, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to zoom into the area that I'm going to be working on to make the best use of my reference, just like that. Okay, so I should be able to see the side of this window in one view, and I should be able to see the front of this window on the other view as well. So what I'm going to do now is again use my interactive create tools to go into create, polygon primitives, and make myself another cube. I'm going to click and drag, which again, this is very handy because it only makes a single face like this, and this polygon cube is probably inside my actual lighthouse, which we can see over here. If I drag out to the side, you can see that I made it over here just like that. And if I look in my perspective view, you can see that now it's kind of like coming out to the surface. If I wanted to, I could come into here and I could use my scale tool just to make that box a little bit fatter, like that, and just move it so that it is intersecting my actual lighthouse, like that. Just make sure that there's no gaps. Perfect. So then what I need to do is start building all of this little interesting detail to build a window. And once I've built one window, it's only a matter of copying and pasting many windows into the actual tower itself. So again, I'm going to model one object and I'm going to replicate it across my geometry. So here, because this is a unique object, it's a good time for me to call it window. And I'm going to call this O1 over here. Perfect. And now I'm going to start subdividing this again. I can come into here and I can start looking at adding some subdivisions. And the way that I'm going to do this, you might find different ways of making it as well. There's no one right way of how to do your modeling. I'm going to come into here, and the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a little extrude on the top of my little window like that. If I want more detail, I can zoom in to the viewport. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the outer edges over here, this one at the top, this face over here, and then I'm going to do another extrude, and I'm going to extrude on the Z-axis. If you have trouble with this, you can use the local translate Z as well. And that's kind of like going to be the base for my little kind of like roof up here, like that. The next thing I want to do is select this face over here, and I'm now going to start cutting into it. So I'm going to do another extrude, but I'm going to scale this face in, and all of the windows are going to be contained inside this polygon face. According to my reference, it's a little bit taller, like that, and there we go. That's the great thing about reference. It gives me complete decision making, clear, because I just have to match what I see in the image as best I can. So now I've created the starting point for my window over here. And now I'm going to start using a whole range of combinations of the other tools inside of Maya as well. So I'm going to go into edge mode. I'm going to do a ring selection across my windows, and I'm going to use the connect tool. I could use the insert edge loop tool as well, but I'm just going to come in here and I want one subdivision in the middle cutting across my window horizontally like that. And then I'm going to select this middle subdivision, double click to create another ring selection going up the window this time, and I'm going to do another connect like that right in the middle. This is going to have a double purpose, that it's going to split the front face into 4 pieces, one for each window, and the other trick is that it's going to come up here and I can select this top part over here and I can drag it up, 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 and that's going to be the middle of my roof. I made that later because I don't have to be cutting things, you know, and kind of like just worrying about adding too many subdivisions too quickly. So I'm then going to select these 2 edges at the top, and I'm just going to visually map those here. So you see that as I move these 2 edges up, I now am creating my roof like that, and I'm just using my reference to align how straight this edge should be like that. And that looks pretty cool. And then I'm going to go into face mode, select the front faces just like that, and then extrude outwards. You make a mistake, not a problem, just press Ctrl Z. You get lost, you guys have the advantage that you can rewind the video and just have a look at it one step at a time. It becomes second nature after a little while. Now we're going to make some windows, each with their individual little frame. So I'm going to select all of these polygons like this, and it's exactly the same as what we did with the lighthouse. I'm going to use the extrude tool one more time. Mighty is the extrude tool, but I'm going to keep the faces together off like that. And then I'm going to scale this inwards just a little bit like that, and that's going to be the start of my windows. If I wanted to keep this very simple, I could just push them in a little bit like that, but I'm feeling a little bit fancy right now, so I'm just going to do a little extrude Z outwards like that. I'm going to do another extrude by pressing G on my keyboard this time. Use the scale tool just to scale those windows in like that. And then I'm going to do press G another time like that. And I'm going to push them in like that. So I've got kind of like this frame that floats out a little bit from the surface, and then it goes in as well. I could just keep going again and again and again and again. But remember that this object is going to be fairly tiny. So all I'm interested in is, does that read as a window when it's seen kind of like from a distance? And I think that's fairly good at what it's doing right there. Perfect. Now, in my reference, I had this little detail, which is over here, which I sculpted kind of like a little banister, not a banister, a ridge that goes around this over here. And how can I do that? Well, some people might frown on me on this as well, because I'm going to cut this window this roof over here on the top by using another tool that I want to introduce to you guys right now, which is the multi-cut tool. Now the multi-cut tool is great because it's like a little surgeon's knife. It allows me to cut polygon faces and introduce new edges and new points as well. So I can be very precise, because what I want to do is to click on this vertice over here, and I want to click on this other vertice over here, and by clicking on both of those and pressing enter, I will create a cut, effectively as though I'd gone with a knife across those polygon edges, and that's what's going to allow me to create kind of like a little bit of a rim here. But that might not be what I want. The multi-cut tool is very flexible, and I can cut by generally just clicking on any polygon surface. It does not care. It will just go to wherever you want, and when you're happy with it, you press enter, and those are the polygon edges that you've cut. But again, you can always use Control-Z to go back, because that is not what I'm interested in doing. I undid so much actually on my keyboard that I've just undone my extrude, so I'm just going to do that one more time over here. And I'm going to bring this back, okay? So the multi-cut tool is a great way for us to be able to add subdivisions, new edges inside of our tool. So again, I'm going to click the multi-cut tool. It will focus on vertices. And if I click on another vertice on the other side of the object, it's going to create a straight line. Press enter. There we go. It's done. Now, what I can do is go back into face mode, choose one of the selection tools, and what I'm going to do is just shift, double click, do a ring like that, and again just use a simple extrude like this, and this time I'm going to extrude using one of the constraints over here so that it scales outwards like that. Perfect, beautiful. So we've got ourselves a little bit of an edge like that, which I'm currently not too convinced about, so I'm actually going to see if I can use one axis at a time, but it seems like the extrude tool is not behaving itself. If you ever have any problems like this, try switching to the scale tool. And with the scale tool selected, and just make it a little bit wider on one of the axes. I can make it a little bit deeper like that. And that's mostly just because I know that when I'm using the scale tool, that the pivot point is going to be exactly in the middle of my selection like that. So that will be very handy for me like that. Just double check that I'm not doing anything too crazy. There seems to be something going on at the back, but that's fine. If you don't see any problems inside of your geometry, you're absolutely fine. So I could leave it like this, but again, I'm going to try and match my reference as closely as I can. So I'm going to go into vertex mode over here. I'm going to grab these vertices over here, or maybe I might do this as an edge selection. Seems like it might make a little bit more sense that way. I'm going to frame that by pressing F on my keyboard, go back to Q so that I can select things without using any of the other tools. I'm just going to select those edges which are inside here like that. And inside my reference, I just had those a little bit higher. So I've got this little kind of like ridge actually going up like that. And then the next thing I'm going to do, and here this might be easier to do with some vertices or maybe an edge, I might just grab these two edges over here. And here's another quick tip from Maya as well, that if you've got two edges like this and you want to move them in by the same amount, one of the things you can do is you can use the scale tool. And this edge and this edge, if I scale it in the z-axis, you're going to see that it's going to scale like that. I actually should have done it in vertex mode because I was saying to myself, yeah, you're probably going to need to select that edge there as well. So again, I'm going to do multiple selections by going into the right selection mode and select this edge, this vertice. I have to really keep saying the right thing. That's important. So I'm going to grab all of these and then do a scale from the middle like that. And you're going to see that that is going to give me roughly the size that I wanted for this. If I ever have any problems where I want to make things thinner or fatter, I click and drag on one of the orthographic views and I can make that thinner or fatter like that as well. Really easy to select things as long as you choose the right view mode and the right selection mode as well. So now that we've finished modeling this window object, we're going to duplicate it a few more times and position it around the actual lighthouse. So I'm going to do something very similar to what we did with the struts as well, where I'm going to take and press insert on my keyboard and choose the grid in this case to try and align my scene to the grid. I'm going to come over here and make sure that that is in the middle of my scene and right at the bottom over there. So again, I'm going to stop using my change pivot. I'm going to turn off the grid snap over there. I'm going to use duplicate special in this case to make 3 extra copies of these windows. So I'm going to go into the edit, duplicate special, and I need to just change a few basic settings. So I'm going to make 3 copies this time, and each of those copies is going to go around the y-axis at 90 degrees, and I'm going to hit duplicate special. There we go. So now I have 4 windows per se, which if I look at my reference over here, I can see that one of these windows is positioned up here in the front view, like so. And one of the things you've got to be careful of is that because this tower is tapered in its shape, you will have to take these objects and you will have to move them a little bit into the actual tower like that. And then what I'm going to do is select my other views over here. I should hopefully see another window somewhere around in my reference. I think we can just about see it over there. So these windows will kind of like be spiraling up the actual tower like that. Can't see that one too clearly, but there we go. In my front view, there's just a little indication of where that is. And again, I'm just going to position that according to my reference and double check in my perspective view that that looks like a reasonable place for that to go. Now, I made 4 versions of this because there's one more thing that I wanted to do, which was this little window over here. It's actually not going to be a window at all. I'm actually going to turn this into the door that's at the front over here. And that's again just reusing parts of your mesh to build something else. So this window 2 over here is actually going to be a base object for my door. I could go through the same process again, but you saw how long it took me to make just that little roof up there, and how much time I just started noodling into it as well. So really what I'm going to do is, first of all, I'm just going to position this inside using my front view over here. I'm going to roughly position it at the right height over here. So I'm going to put that over there so that that actually matches the top of the window like that. And in my top view over here, this window is now going to be a door, so I'm going to use the scale tool, and I'm going to scale it in the z-axis until it is as wide as the door, like that. And then I'm going to select all of the back faces over here. So I'm going to grab faces over here, and what I'm going to do is just very quickly select all of these, and I'm going to delete them because they're going to be inside the tower. I'm not going to see them, and I just want to get rid of as much extra geometry as I possibly can. You can see that there's some other stuff in here which has just been created like that, and I'm just doing a little bit of cleanup, so just getting rid of all of those edges like that. And I could even delete the ones which are at the bottom over here. So I'm just going to use F to frame in here, select those 2 bottom faces over there, delete over there, and that's going to be the start of me creating the door for my scene like that. Okay, sounds a bit crazy, but what I'm going to do is go into vertex mode over here, look in my side view, and you'll see that there's some vertices that are not aligned, and I can grab all of these vertices like this. And what I can do, just to put them all straight, is use another quick trick, which is to use the scale tool, and I'm going to scale all of these in the x-axis, and you're going to see that if I drag the x-axis all the way towards one another, it's going to take all of those vertices and it's going to put them onto a singular plane like that. Hopefully there won't be too much redundancy there, but then I can drag all of these faces into the tower like that, because I've still got that vertice selection, and you'll see that what it's done is that it's placed all of the vertices inside there perfectly. Now, I had 4 little windows over here. I need to have a door instead. So I'm going to go into face mode, select all of these polygon faces like that, and again, using keyboard shortcuts, I'm going to use the greater than tool to select all of those frames that I spent a lot of time making like that. And once I've gotten kind of like inside here, I'm going to press delete, and I'm going to cut this face open like that. Okay, so I've gotten rid of all of the windows, and this is going to be the gap that's going to be my door. So this door over here, how am I going to fill this in? Well, very simply, I'm just going to select one of the edges that go around it, go into mesh, choose fill hole. That creates a hole like that, and I just need to add in some subdivisions inside of here just to make everything consistent as before. You're going to see that I'm going to delete some of these as well, but it's good to kind of like keep everything subdivided as long as you can. So I'm going to come into here. I'm going to go into my multi-cut tool. I'm going to go from vertice to vertice, press enter. I'm going to go to vertice to vertice and press enter again, so that I've cut this up into 4s like that. And now what I'm going to do is start deleting some things that I know I'm not going to need. I'm going to take these 2 polygon faces down here, and I am going to use move, rotate, or scale tool to select them. I'm going to delete them like that. Okay, and I'm going to do a similar thing in my front view over here, where I'm going to grab my vertex mode, and inside vertex mode I'm going to come in here, scale, this time in the y-axis, and bring it down like that, so that the bottom of the door is flat, and then I'm going to just drag this polygon edge all the way down, 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 down into the ground like that. Okay, so what I've ended up with is this little shape over here. Now, depending on your design, I think that this polygon edge I won't need. So I'm going to double click it, and I'm going to press Control and Backspace, and I'm just going to erase it. And again, remember Control and Backspace on edge mode, because if not, you're going to be left with vertices floating here in 3D space. Okay. Now, just to finish off, I'm going to model the door. And it's very similar to making a window over here. I'm going to select these 2 faces over here, because now I've got 2 subdivisions, and I'm going to use an extrude. So I'm going to press extrude. I'm going to do a scale extrude from the middle like that, and I'm going to then do a little bit of a scale in the x-axis like that. And again, because I'm going to keep it very simple, I'm going to make sure that I can't see anything in the ground. Good, that's intersecting over there. I'm going to choose my select tool, and I'm just going to select, I have to zoom in a little, these vertices, like these faces over here. Not that one, this one please. How close do you have to be to make a selection? There we go. And can I just select that, choose a simple extrude, bring that out on the z-axis, and that's going to be my door frame like that. There we go. And if I really wanted to as well, I can just add a little door handle inside there as well, which I could either do by grabbing polygon face here, or I can just model it from a box if I have my interactive create mode turned on. I'm going to come into here, choose a box, come up over here roughly where I think I should paint a door handle like that. And come into here, that looks like a nice size for a door handle, like so. And then I'm going to take that object, and in my top view, I'm going to move it outwards towards here. I notice that I've made it a little bit thick, but that is perfectly fine. I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to choose edge mode, face mode better. Grab this here, and let's just do a little handle like that to float around perfectly for my door like that. I actually will probably put it on the other side of the door like that. Don't know why, it just feels a little bit better for some bizarre reason. There we go. And then what I'm going to do is just give this a little bit of geometry. So again, using either the connect or the insert edge loop tool, whatever you guys fancy, you can create these little 3D models any way you want at this stage. The important thing is that, do I have the confidence to actually make the objects in the way that I would like to? Another quick tip as well, because I'm having some trouble getting behind the door itself, what I'm going to do is go into object mode very briefly, select this handle over here, and I'm going to go in my perspective view only to show, isolate, select, and choose view selected. And that's going to hide all of the other objects inside of my scene except the one that I have selected over here. So what can I do with this here? Well, now that I can see behind my object, I can go into face mode. Again, another mighty extrude like that, into the back like that. And then what I'm going to do is just select this polygon face over here. Use the scale tool to scale it down a little bit so that it looks a little bit more like a handle like that. And if I really wanted to, I can go into edge mode, select this top edge, select this bottom edge over here. Let's add a bevel in there as well, just to create a little bit of that handle as well. And if I wanted to, I could add an extra segment there for extra roundness as well. So let's put up 2 segments there, and then let's see how big this bevel should be. There we go, I just rounded off at the edges over there. That's leaving an n-gon in there, which is a many multi-sided polygon face as well. That's not ideal, but as a beginner, that is fine. And if I think that that looks to scale, once I go back to Show, Isolate Select, and turn off View Selected, all I need to do is put this into the door, and that should match me perfectly just fine like that. There we go. Perfect. So there we go. We've got ourselves a little door handle, we've got ourselves a front entrance, we've got a series of windows going up here, and if you really want to, at this stage, you can select the image planes over here as we've finished with them, and we can go and press Ctrl H to hide them away, and I'll just maximize that for view. And here we have the low poly lighthouse made out of multiple objects. And now's the time when you can save this. Again, do another quick file, increment and save. And there we go. We've got ourselves a nice little tower over here that we can save, render out, email over to somebody, get some comments, and we can continue building more things inside of our little 3D scenes. Okay, so thanks very much for watching today. I hope you guys appreciated the tutorial as well, but hopefully you've been able to see how even modeling in low poly and working with the basic shapes inside of Maya, you can still create models that have quite a lot of quality and quite a lot of detail to them as well. It's important for you guys to practice all of these skills, so keep looking at the tutorials, go online, find other resources, or really start looking for things that you want to build yourselves. Importantly, if you like the video, please give us a like on YouTube, it really helps a lot. And if you want to get the next tutorial as soon as it's out as well, please consider subscribing to the channel as well. I hope that you guys get a lot of, good time and good value out of this as well. And I hope to see you guys at the next time. So, see you in a week's time. Goodbye.